Hello, pipe smokers. David Russell Mosley, the Enchanted Pipe Smoker here. Well, autumn has arrived here in the Granite State. The days are getting cooler and shorter, the leaves are beginning to turn, and with them my mind turns to other things. In the church calendar, we're still in the midst of what's called ordinary time. Ordinary time is a period, there are two periods of ordinary time in the church calendar, and they're meant to be times to remind us that God isn't only present in the big events. He isn't only present in those moments like the birth of Christ or crucifixion or the resurrection, but that he is present all the time. And yet, I often find it particularly difficult to be mindful of that in the big stretch of ordinary time that happens from Pentecost until Advent. Summer just doesn't inspire much in me, I'm afraid. Life gets too busy. Too many other things begin to occupy my mind, and I get lost in it a little bit. But as the days begin to turn, as we come closer and closer to All Saints' Day, on the 1st of November, I begin to think again. I begin to, not that I stop thinking this summer, but it's easier to think about God being there in the everyday and in the ordinary. And maybe it's just because I'm not built for summer. Maybe, I'm too hairy, I'm frankly too fat to really enjoy summer, warm summers too much. But I can kind of get lost in it, and now as autumn begins to return, so does my desire to see things differently. Maybe there's something about this time of harvest, maybe there's something about this time of change as we head towards winter. I don't know. An interesting little fact for you, I've often been dissatisfied with the seasonal names fall and spring. They're just, to an extent, they're just kind of normal verbs that have a lot of different potential meanings, and aren't necessarily applicable everywhere for these seasons. So I went to looking up, what are some old words for these seasons. I found out for a while spring was called ver or were, the Latin word for green. So it's not much better than spring in that regard. But I learned that the Anglo-Saxons actually used to call spring Lent. The period that traditionally the church calendar we associate with fasting, and so on, the period between Ash Wednesday and Easter Sunday. But I also found out that they called autumn or fall harvest. I think there's something really profound about that. It reminds us so much more of what this season is about, what's supposed to be going on here, our connectedness to the land, our connectedness to the world. This, for those of us in the northern hemisphere anyway, is a time of harvest. This is the time when we bring in the crops. This is the time when we, begin to enjoy the fruits of our labor over the spring and the summer. Anyway, that was just something that struck me, and I wanted to share that. My pipe's gone out, by the way, and my lighter is a bit too soaked at the moment in lighter fluid, and so the whole thing kind of begins to catch on fire when I light it. So I'll need to dry that off, and I haven't anything on me to do that with. So actually, excuse me, I'm just going to disappear halfway for a second. And I'm back. Matches. Not matches 860, but just matches. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video is what I'm reading. This is... I love to read. Some of you know that fairly well about me. And I usually have multiple books going at once, so I thought I'd just only have one of the books that I'm actively reading up here with me. Because I actually just finished a couple, so I'm just gonna show you the book, talk a little bit about what I've been reading, what I'm gonna read, and we'll call it a day. Try to keep this under 10 minutes. So the kind of main book I'm reading right now is this one. It's Not As the World Gives. The Way of Creative Justice, by a gentleman called Stratford Caldecott. Stratford sadly passed just a little over a year ago. And he has had a profound effect on my thinking, my theology, my understanding of higher education. He was a Catholic theologian who wrote on various topics, from the relationship of religion and physics to education and liberal arts. He's written a book on the Lord of the Rings. The man was very prolific. This book is about it's about justice in a sense, and so to that extent, it's about and he would slightly balk at this, but it's about Catholic social teaching, which is traditionally this understanding of society and justice from a Catholic, from a Christian worldview. He would balk at the term Catholic social teaching because that makes it sound like we've got this thing called normal society, and then we're going to super add to that this Catholic, this Christian notion to it. Whereas what he thinks that people like Pope Leo XIII, who is the first to kind of kick this off in a very concentrated and intentional kind of way, but it goes back to the Book of Acts in some ways, and their treatment of the poor among them and how they live together in society. He would, say that there isn't society on the one hand and religion on the other, and Catholic social teaching is trying to inject religion into society, but that true society has a religious foundation and has a Christian foundation, because he's a Christian, and so am I, so I agree with him. You might not. That's great. That's great in the sense that we can have conversations about what is society and what does that mean. Okay. I've just finished reading two other books. One was the Academic Sermons of St. Thomas Aquinas. Those were just recently translated in the last 10 years, I think. Not a lot of people have done a lot of research on them. I read them more devotionally than academically. Very interesting. If you like Thomas Aquinas, I recommend checking those out, because one of the complaints about Thomas is that he can be too... People think of him as too esoteric, too theoretical. And reading these sermons will remind you that sometimes even the esoteric and the theoretical, the contemplative, is integral to how we live. I'm also in the midst of my annual reread of Jane Austen's 6 novels. So I've already read Sense and Sensibility, and last night finished Pride and Prejudice again. To the men specifically, if you haven't read Jane Austen, read Jane Austen. I cannot recommend it enough. Her understanding of virtue, her understanding of morals, her understanding of manliness, of manhood, I think it's absolutely essential for us to read these books. And beyond those things, they're excellent stories. They really are. So give them a go. To replace those two books, today I'll be getting from the library, since I don't have my copy of it here, Mansfield Park, which is the next book in publication order, which is the order I'm reading them in this year. So that's Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion. I'm pretty sure. I'm also slowly working my way through the poetry of John Donne, which has been really interesting. Alright. I've gone over 10 minutes, which I said I wouldn't do. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Let me know, what are you reading? What do you think about the autumn coming? Has it arrived where you are? Does it arrive where you are? I know some of my friends, like Eric, the Theobachinist, out on the west coast, don't get much of an autumn. What do you think about autumn, and what are you reading? Alright, well, farewell, my friends. When you sit in peace with your pipe, think of me.